The hallway outside the music auditorium felt longer than usual that morning. Maya walked slowly, her violin case gripped tightly in both hands. Her heart was racing so fast she could feel it pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment she'd been preparing for since she was 12 years old. The university's symphony orchestra only held auditions twice a year, and getting in meant everything to her. It wasn't just about playing music. It was about proving something she'd been trying to prove her entire life. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The auditorium was beautiful, with rows of red velvet seats and a stage that seemed to glow under the warm lights. At a long table near the front sat 5 people. The conductor, Mr. Harrison, was in the middle. He was an older man with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. Around him sat 4 student musicians, all of them already part of the orchestra. Maya's hands felt sweaty. She wiped them on her jeans and walked forward. The wooden floor creaked slightly under her feet, and she could feel every vibration through her shoes. When she reached the front, she set down her violin case and began to sign with her hands. A young woman sitting at the edge of the table stood up. She was the interpreter the university had arranged. "My name is Maya Chen." The interpreter spoke Maya's words out loud. "I'm 19 years old, and I'd like to audition for the second violin position." Mr. Harrison nodded politely and made a note on his paper. But one of the students at the table, a tall guy with perfectly styled hair holding an expensive-looking violin, let out a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. His name tag read, "First Violin Section Leader." "Wait, hold on," he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "You're deaf, right? Like completely deaf?" Maya nodded. She was used to this question. She'd been deaf since she was 7 years old after a severe illness, but she'd never let it stop her from loving music. The guy shook his head and looked at the others like he'd just heard the most ridiculous thing ever. "Can you even play? I mean, seriously, how is someone who can't hear supposed to play in an orchestra?"
"You need to keep time with everyone else."
"You need to hear what's happening around you." Maya felt her stomach twist. She'd expected doubt. She'd prepared for questions. But something about the way he said it, the sneer in his voice, the way he looked at her like she was wasting everyone's time, it stung more than she wanted to admit. The interpreter translated his words into sign language, but Maya had already read his lips. She'd gotten good at that over the years. She took a breath and signed back, keeping her face calm even though her insides were shaking. "I've been playing violin for 12 years, the interpreter said. "I practice 6 hours a day. I understand that you might have doubts, but I'd like the chance to show you what I can do." Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and looked at Maya with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "Maya, I appreciate your courage in coming here today, but I have to be honest with you. Orchestra work is incredibly demanding. We need split-second timing, immediate response to the conductor's cues, and awareness of what every section is playing. How do you manage that without hearing?" Before Maya could answer, the first violin guy jumped in again. "This is crazy. We're preparing for the winter concert. We don't have time to accommodate someone who's going to slow everyone down. No offense," he added, though his tone made it clear he didn't actually care about being offensive. One of the other students at the table, a girl with kind eyes holding a cello, spoke up softly. "Maybe we should at least let her audition. Isn't that why she's here?" "Thank you for wasting everyone's time," the guy muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya's face felt hot. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her violin case. Part of her wanted to leave. Part of her wanted to tell this arrogant guy exactly what she thought of him. But instead, she did what she always did when people doubted her. She decided to let her playing speak for itself. She lifted her violin from its case. The instrument was beautiful, made of warm, honey-colored wood. It had been her grandmother's. Maya ran her fingers along its smooth surface, feeling the familiar comfort of it. She also pulled out something else, a flat wooden board about the size of a thick book. She placed it on the floor where she was going to stand. The first violin guy rolled his eyes. "What's that, a step stool?" Maya ignored him. She positioned herself on the small platform, standing with one foot firmly on it. This was her vibration board, something she'd made herself. It helped her feel the piano accompaniment through her feet. Mr. Harrison leaned forward, suddenly more interested. "What will you be playing for us today?" Maya signed, and the interpreter spoke. "Beethoven's Violin Concerto in D major. The first movement." A few eyebrows raised around the table. It was a challenging piece, Very challenging, ambitious choice, Mr. Harrison said. He gestured to the piano player who was sitting nearby. Whenever you're ready. Maya lifted her violin to her shoulder. She closed her eyes for just a moment. In that moment, she thought about everything that had brought her here. The hours of practice, the tears, the people who told her she'd never be able to play, the teacher who believed in her when no one else did. She thought about her grandmother, who played this same violin in orchestras all over the world before she passed away. Her grandmother always told her that music wasn't just something you heard. It was something you felt, something that lived in your bones and your heartbeat and your soul. Maya opened her eyes. She raised her bow, and then she began to play. The first note that came from Maya's violin cut through the auditorium like a ray of light breaking through clouds. It was pure, clear, perfect. The piano player had started the accompaniment, and through the wooden platform under her foot, Maya could feel every note vibrating up through her body. She'd spent years training herself to sense these vibrations, to understand them like a language only she could speak. Her bow moved across the strings with confidence. Her fingers danced along the neck of the violin, finding each position with the kind of precision that only comes from thousands of hours of practice. She swayed slightly with the music, her whole body moving as if she and the violin were one living, breathing thing. The panel at the table sat completely still. The first violin guy, who'd been so quick to mock her just moments ago, had his mouth slightly open. He'd been ready to hear a disaster. He'd been ready to say, "I told you so." But what was happening right now wasn't a disaster. It was something else entirely. Mr. Harrison leaned forward in his chair, his pen frozen above his notepad. His eyes followed Maya's every movement. He'd been conducting orchestras for 30 years. He'd heard thousands of auditions. But this was different. Maya's eyes were closed now. She wasn't reading any music. She'd memorized every single note of this concerto. But more than that, she was feeling it. The emotion poured out of her instrument like water from a fountain. There were moments of joy, moments of sadness, moments that made your chest feel tight and your eyes want to water. The other students at the table had completely forgotten about their papers and their scoring rubrics. They were just listening. Really listening. The girl with the cello had tears forming in her eyes. Even she didn't fully understand why. There was just something about the way Maya played that reached inside you and touched something deep. Maya's foot remained firmly planted on the vibration board. Through it, she could sense when the piano got louder or softer. She could feel the rhythm in her bones. People always asked her how she could play without hearing. But the truth was, she didn't need to hear the way others did. She experienced music in a completely different way. She felt it as waves moving through her body. She saw it in the way the conductor's arms moved. She understood it as mathematics and emotion combined into something beautiful. There was a particularly difficult passage coming up, a series of quick notes that required incredible finger work. It was the part where most violinists made mistakes, even the good ones. The first violin guy knew this part well. He'd played it himself many times. He found himself holding his breath, almost wanting her to fail, but also weirdly hoping she wouldn't. Maya's fingers flew across the strings. The notes tumbled out so fast they seemed to blend into one continuous sound, and she didn't miss a single one, not one. The passage was flawless. Mr. Harrison actually gasped. He couldn't help it. The music built toward the climax. Maya's bow moved with increasing intensity. Her body rocked with the emotion of it. Sweat had formed on her forehead, not from nervousness but from the pure physical effort of playing with such passion. This wasn't just a performance. This was her pouring her entire soul into every note, and then the final phrase. She drew out the last note, letting it sing through the auditorium. The sound seemed to hang in the air even after she lifted her bow from the strings. She held her position for just a moment, her eyes still closed, letting the vibrations fade away through her body. Then she opened her eyes and lowered her violin. The auditorium was silent. For a second, Maya felt panic rise in her chest. Had she done something wrong? Had she completely misjudged how well she'd played? She couldn't hear if there were whispers or sighs or sounds of disappointment. But then Mr. Harrison started clapping. His hands came together in loud, firm applause. And immediately after, the other panel members joined in. All of them. Even the first violin guy, though he looked like he was clapping in a daze, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just witnessed. The piano player was clapping too, nodding his head with a big smile on his face. The girl with the cello was wiping her eyes while she clapped. Maya felt relief wash over her like warm water. She gave a small bow, the way she'd been taught to do after performances. Mr. Harrison stood up from the table. He walked closer to the stage, still clapping, and then he stopped. He looked at Maya with something that seemed like wonder in his eyes. "That was extraordinary," he said, speaking slowly and facing her directly so she could read his lips. "Truly extraordinary. In all my years of teaching, I've rarely heard Beethoven played with such emotion and technical skill." The interpreter quickly signed his words, but Maya had already understood most of it from his lips and his expression. "But Maya," Mr. Harrison continued, and now his face showed concern mixed with curiosity, "I need to understand something. How will you follow a conductor during actual performances? An orchestra isn't just about playing your part perfectly. It's about responding in real time to the conductor's changes. Sometimes we speed up or slow down in the moment. Sometimes there are sudden stops or changes in volume. How would you manage that without hearing the conductor's cues or the other musicians?" It was a fair question. Maya had known it was coming. This was always the next hurdle. People could accept that she could play her instrument. That part was visible, but they couldn't imagine how she could work as part of a living, breathing orchestra, where things changed second by second. The first violin guy crossed his arms. He'd recovered from his shock, and now the skepticism was creeping back into his face. "Yeah, exactly. Playing a solo piece at home is one thing, but keeping time with 50 other musicians? Following dynamic changes? That's impossible without hearing." Maya set her violin down gently on its case. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small. It looked like a watch, but it was bulkier, with strange patterns on the band. She held it up for everyone to see and began to sign. The interpreter's voice filled the room. "I'd like to show you something," Maya said through her interpreter, "something I've been working on for the past 2 years." Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and leaned in closer, fascinated. "What is it?" Maya smiled. It was time to show them what she was really capable of. Maya strapped the device around her wrist. It looked like a fitness tracker, but the band was covered in small raised dots and patterns. Tiny lights blinked along its side in different colors. She began to sign, and the interpreter translated her words. "This is something I designed with help from students in the engineering department. We call it a haptic conductor system." Mr. Harrison tilted his head, intrigued but clearly not understanding yet. "A haptic what?" Maya smiled and continued signing. "Haptic means touch. This device lets me feel what a conductor is doing with their baton. It translates their movements into vibrations on my wrist." She pulled out a small sensor from her bag, about the size of a deck of cards. This sensor tracks the conductor's movements. It uses motion detection technology, kind of like what's in video game controllers. When the conductor moves their baton, this sensor picks it up instantly. The panel members were all paying close attention now. Even the first violin guy had uncrossed his arms and was leaning forward to get a better look. "The sensor sends signals to my wristband," Maya continued through her interpreter. "Different conducting gestures create different vibration patterns. A steady beat gives me steady pulses. When the conductor speeds up, the pulses come faster. When they slow down, the pulses slow down too." She touched different parts of the wristband as she explained. "These raised dots on the band? They vibrate in different ways for different musical instructions. A strong pulse means play louder. A gentle flutter means play softer. A sharp double tap means there's a sudden stop coming." Mr. Harrison's eyes lit up with understanding. "So you're essentially feeling the conductor's instructions through your skin?" Maya nodded enthusiastically. "But does it actually work?" the first violin guy asked, still sounding doubtful. "I mean, in theory it sounds cool, but can you really follow a conductor in real time with that thing?" Maya looked directly at him and signed something. The interpreter spoke with a slight smile in her voice. "Would you like to see a demonstration?" Mr. Harrison stood up immediately. "Yes, absolutely. I'd very much like to see this." He walked up onto the stage and picked up the conductor's baton that was resting on the music stand. Maya handed him the small sensor. "Just clip this to your belt or put it in your pocket. It needs to move with your body to track the baton properly." He attached it to his belt and took his position in front of Maya. She strapped the wristband securely on her wrist and picked up her violin again. "I'm ready whenever you are," she signed. Mr. Harrison raised his baton. "I'm going to conduct a simple 4/4 time pattern. Just follow along. He began conducting, his baton moving in a basic downward and upward pattern. Maya closed her eyes and started playing a scale. Her playing matched his tempo perfectly. When he sped up, she sped up. When he slowed down, she slowed down. They were completely synchronized. The panel members watched in amazement. The cello player actually clapped her hands together in delight. "Now I'm going to try something tricky," Mr. Harrison said, making sure Maya could see his lips before she closed her eyes again. "I'm going to change tempo suddenly and throw in a few stops." He started conducting again, but this time he made it challenging. He went from slow to fast, then suddenly stopped with his hand up. Maya's playing stopped at exactly the same moment. Then he started again, this time with big sweeping motions that meant play louder. Maya's volume increased immediately, then small, gentle movements. Her playing became soft and delicate. It was like watching two people have a conversation without words. Every instruction he gave through his baton, she received through her wrist and responded perfectly. When they finished, Mr. Harrison lowered his baton with a huge grin on his face. "That is remarkable. Truly remarkable. I've never seen anything like this." The other panel members were nodding and whispering excitedly to each other, but the first violin guy still wasn't completely convinced. He stood up from the table. "Okay, that's impressive," he admitted, though he still sounded reluctant. "But you're using technology. That's basically cheating, isn't it? The rest of us have to rely on our ears and our training. You're using a machine to do it for you." Maya's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She'd heard this argument before. She signed slowly, deliberately, and the interpreter's voice carried a quiet strength. "Hearing aids are technology too. They're machines that help people hear. Glasses are technology that help people see. Why is my device any different? I'm not using it to play better than I actually can. I'm using it to access the same information that you access through your ears." The first violin guy opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Harrison held up his hand. "She makes an excellent point. We don't consider it cheating when someone uses glasses to read music. This is an accessibility tool, not an unfair advantage." He turned to Maya. "However, I do have one concern. What happens if the device malfunctions? What if the battery dies during a performance? Technology can fail at the worst possible moments." It was a valid worry, and Maya knew it. She'd thought about this exact scenario many times. Her answer came through the interpreter. "That's why I practice both with and without the device. I've learned to watch conductors very carefully. I can read their body language, see the patterns in their movements, and feel vibrations through the floor from other instruments. The device makes things easier and more precise, but I don't completely depend on it." Mr. Harrison stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Still, orchestra work is demanding in ways that solo performance isn't. You need to blend with other musicians, adjust to what's happening around you, respond to the subtle dynamics of a group." He paused, then made a decision. "Maya, your audition was outstanding. Your device is innovative and impressive, but before I can offer you a position, I need to see how you perform with the full orchestra. We have a rehearsal next Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon. Can you attend?" Maya's heart jumped. This wasn't an outright rejection. It was a chance. A real chance. She nodded and signed quickly. "Yes, I'll be there. Thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," Mr. Harrison said kindly. "Tuesday will be the real test. You'll be playing with 50 other musicians, following complex pieces, managing multiple changes. It's going to be challenging." The first violin guy grabbed his violin case. "I'll believe it when I see it," he muttered, just loud enough for a few people to hear. Maya watched him leave, then began carefully packing her own violin. Her hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. From excitement, from hope. She'd cleared the first hurdle, but she knew the biggest challenge was still ahead. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Tuesday arrived faster than Maya expected. She'd barely slept the night before, running through every possible scenario in her mind. She'd checked her device 100 times, making sure it was fully charged, making sure every vibration pattern worked perfectly. She arrived at the rehearsal hall 30 minutes early. The room was much bigger than the audition space, with risers set up for different sections of the orchestra. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, music stands already in place. The space smelled like wood polish and old sheet music. Other musicians started trickling in, carrying instrument cases and chatting with each other. Some of them glanced at Maya curiously. A few smiled politely. Most just ignored her. busy with their own warm-up routines and conversations. The first violin guy arrived with a group of his friends. When he saw Maya, he said something to them and they all looked over. Maya couldn't read their lips from that distance, but she could guess what he was saying. She focused on setting up her music stand and tried not to let it bother her. A woman with kind eyes carrying a viola sat down next to Maya. She tapped Maya's shoulder gently to get her attention, then spoke slowly so Maya could read her lips. "Hi, I'm in the viola section. Welcome to the orchestra. Don't worry about the first rehearsal. Everyone's nervous their first time." Maya signed thank you and the woman smiled warmly. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything in that moment. Mr. Harrison entered the room carrying his folder of sheet music. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. Today we're working on Mozart's Symphony No. 40. Everyone should have the music on their stands." Maya had studied this piece for days. She knew every note, every dynamic marking, every tempo change. Her device was strapped securely to her wrist, and the sensor was clipped to Mr. Harrison's belt. She felt as ready as she'd ever be. The orchestra began tuning their instruments. The cacophony of different pitches and sounds would have been overwhelming to hear, but Maya just watched and waited. She placed one hand lightly on the back of the chair in front of her, feeling the vibrations traveling through the floor and furniture. From the top, Mr. Harrison announced, raising his baton. "Remember, this is Mozart. Clean, precise, elegant. Let's begin." He brought the baton down and the orchestra came to life. Maya felt the pulse through her wristband and began playing with her section. The second violins had a beautiful melodic line, and she poured herself into it. For the first few minutes, everything went perfectly. She could feel the steady rhythm through her device, sense the energy of the musicians around her, and see Mr. Harrison's clear conducting patterns. She was keeping up beautifully, blending with her section. The first violin guy kept glancing over at her, looking almost disappointed that she was doing well. Then they reached a complex transition, a part where the tempo shifted and different sections had to enter at precise moments. Maya watched Mr. Harrison intently, waiting for the cue for her section to come back in. And then it happened. Her wristband stopped vibrating. Completely. No pulses, no patterns, nothing. Maya's eyes shot down to the device. The small lights that usually blinked green were now red. Battery dead. But that was impossible. She'd charged it fully that morning. She'd checked it 3 times before leaving home. Panic flooded through her chest. She looked back up at Mr. Harrison, trying to follow just with her eyes, but without the device's precise timing, she was suddenly lost. The orchestra was moving through the transition, and she'd already missed her entrance. She tried to jump back in, but she came in a half-beat too late. Her timing was off, and suddenly her entire section sounded wrong. The violinist next to her glanced over with concern. Others in the section were faltering too, confused by her wrong timing throwing them off. Mr. Harrison's baton stopped moving. The music crashed to a halt. Hold on, he called out. "Second violins, let's take that transition again. We're losing the tempo there." Maya felt her face burning hot with embarrassment. She quickly signed to her interpreter who was sitting at the side of the room. The interpreter spoke up. "Maya's device has stopped working. The battery died unexpectedly." The first violin guy stood up immediately, his voice loud and frustrated. "This is exactly what I warned about. We can't rely on someone who needs a machine just to keep time. What happens during an actual concert? What happens when the technology fails in front of an audience?" He looked around at the other musicians, his hands gesturing emphatically. "We have the winter concert in 6 weeks. We can't afford to have someone who might just stop playing in the middle of a piece because their gadget breaks." Some of the other musicians nodded. They looked uncomfortable, but they were thinking about the same thing. Reliability. Trust. Could they depend on Maya? Mr. Harrison's face showed disappointment and concern. He clearly wanted Maya to succeed, but the practical reality was staring him in the face. "Maya, do you have backup batteries?" She shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she signed. "I checked it this morning. It showed full charge." "I don't understand what happened." "Technology fails," the first violin guy said flatly. "That's what happens. And we can't build an orchestra around something that might fail at any moment." Maya felt tears threatening to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. She'd worked too hard. She'd come too far. This couldn't be how it ended. "Let's take a 15-minute break," Mr. Harrison announced. "Everyone step outside, get some water. We'll regroup." Musicians started filing out of the rehearsal hall, many of them whispering to each other. The viola player who'd been kind to Maya touched her shoulder sympathetically before leaving. But sympathy wasn't what Maya needed right now. She sat alone in the emptying rehearsal hall, staring at her useless device. Her violin rested across her lap. The beautiful instrument her grandmother had played seemed to mock her now. What good was all her skill, all her practice, all her passion if she couldn't even make it through one rehearsal? The first violin guy's words echoed in her mind. "Can you even play?" Maybe he'd been right all along. Maybe this was impossible. Maybe she'd been fooling herself, thinking she could do something that required perfect hearing when she couldn't hear anything at all. But then something her childhood music teacher once told her came back to her. A memory from years ago when she'd first lost her hearing and thought she'd never play music again. Maya, her teacher had said, you learned to feel music long before you ever needed that device. The device is helpful, yes, but you don't need it. You never did. Trust yourself. Trust what you've spent years learning. Music isn't just in your ears. It's in your whole body. In your heart. Maya looked at her violin. Then she looked at the empty conductor's podium. Then she made a decision. When everyone returned from break, Maya was still sitting in her chair, but something had changed. Her wristband was off. It sat on the floor next to her music stand, powerless and forgotten. Mr. Harrison noticed immediately. "Maya, do you need more time to fix your device?" "We can wait." Maya shook her head. She signed clearly, and the interpreter spoke her words with strength. "I don't need it. I'd like to try without the device." The first violin guy laughed, but it wasn't a cruel laugh this time. It was a laugh of disbelief. "Now you're just being stubborn. You couldn't do it with the machine. How are you going to do it without it?" Maya looked him straight in the eyes and signed one simple sentence. "Watch me." The rehearsal hall felt different now, quieter somehow, even though Maya couldn't hear the silence. Every eye in the room was on her. Some looked skeptical. Some looked worried. A few looked hopeful. Mr. Harrison stood at the conductor's podium, his baton in hand, studying Maya's face. He could see the determination there, but he also saw something else. Confidence. Real, deep confidence that came from somewhere beyond technology or tricks. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Maya?" he asked, speaking slowly so she could read his lips clearly. Maya nodded. She positioned her violin under her chin and placed one hand lightly on the back of the chair in front of her. Not gripping it, just resting her fingers there, barely touching. It was subtle enough that most people wouldn't even notice. "All right then," Mr. Harrison said. "We'll take it from the transition. The part where we stopped. Is everyone ready?" The orchestra members lifted their instruments. The first violin guy shook his head slightly, like he was watching someone about to walk off a cliff. But he raised his violin anyway. Mr. Harrison lifted his baton. Maya's eyes locked onto him with laser focus. She wasn't just watching his baton. She was watching everything. The way his shoulders moved. The tension in his arms. The rhythm of his breathing. The slight lean of his body before each major change. The baton came down and the orchestra began. Maya felt the vibrations immediately. Through her fingertips on the chair, through her feet on the floor, through the air itself moving around her. The cellos and basses created deep vibrations that traveled through the wooden floor like ripples in water. The violas and other violins created patterns in the air that she could almost see. But it was more than just feeling vibrations. Maya had spent years, thousands of hours learning to read the invisible language of an orchestra. She could see when other musicians took breaths before their entrances. She could see the unified movement of bow arms in her section. She could feel the energy shift in the room when the music was about to change. Her entrance was coming. She watched Mr. Harrison's baton, saw the pattern, felt the count in her bones. And when the moment came, she played perfect timing. Perfect pitch. She was right with her section, blending beautifully. The transition came. The tricky part where she'd failed before. Mr. Harrison's conducting changed, his movements becoming more fluid as the tempo shifted. Maya didn't miss a beat. She felt the acceleration in her chest, saw it in the increased speed of bow movements around her, sensed it in the way the floor vibrations quickened. She played through it flawlessly. The viola player next to her glanced over with wide eyes. The second violin section leader, an older student who'd been playing for years, looked genuinely amazed. But Maya wasn't done proving herself yet. There was a section coming up where the conductor would make sudden dynamic changes. quick shifts from loud to soft that required instant response. It was a test of any musician's ability to follow conducting in real time. Mr. Harrison threw in a sudden gesture for the music to get louder. His arms swept wide, his whole body expanding with the motion. Maya saw it and responded immediately, her bow pressing harder, her playing growing in intensity. Then just as suddenly he brought his hand close to his chest, making himself small, signaling for soft playing. Maya's volume dropped instantly, her tone becoming gentle and delicate. They were connected. Conductor and musician, communicating without words, without sound, but perfectly in sync. The piece built toward its climax. The full orchestra was playing now, all 50 musicians creating this massive wall of sound that Maya experienced as waves of vibration rolling through her entire body. She could feel the power of the brass section, the sweetness of the woodwinds, the foundation of the percussion. It all came together like colors blending in a painting, and she was part of it, truly part of it. Not separate, not different, but woven into the fabric of the music itself. Mr. Harrison brought them to the final phrase, his baton moving in one last sweeping gesture, then stopping sharply. The orchestra stopped with him perfectly together, including Maya. For a moment nobody moved. Then Mr. Harrison slowly lowered his baton, a smile spreading across his face. He started clapping. Then the principal cellist started clapping. Then the viola player next to Maya. Then more and more musicians joined in until the entire orchestra was applauding. Not the polite applause you give after any decent rehearsal. This was real. This was genuine appreciation for something remarkable they'd just witnessed. The first violin guy sat frozen in his chair, his violin still raised to his shoulder. He looked like someone had just explained a magic trick to him, and he still couldn't believe how it was done. Slowly, he lowered his instrument and set it in his lap. Mr. Harrison walked over to Maya, still clapping. When he reached her, he stopped and spoke carefully, making sure she could see every word. Maya, what you just did was extraordinary. You don't need the device at all, do you? Maya lowered her violin and signed, the interpreter translating. I created the device to show people I could participate, to prove I had a way to keep time and follow conducting. But the truth is, losing my hearing forced me to connect with music differently than most people ever will. She paused, gathering her thoughts, then continued signing. I don't just hear music in my ears like I used to. I feel it everywhere, in my bones, in my skin, in my heartbeat. I see it in patterns and movements. I understand it as mathematics and emotion combined. The device was useful, yes, but I experience music with my whole body, not just one sense. Mr. Harrison nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're not playing despite being deaf. You're playing with an entirely different, perhaps even deeper connection to the music. Exactly, Maya signed. The first violin guy stood up and walked over. His face looked different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced with something that looked like respect and maybe even embarrassment. I owe you an apology, he said, making sure to face her directly. I judged you before I knew anything about you. I assumed that being deaf meant you couldn't do this. But you're not just as good as the rest of us. He paused, then added honestly, you might actually be better, or at least more dedicated than anyone I've ever met. Maya smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile or a smug one, just genuine appreciation for his honesty. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. I think it's clear what my decision is. Maya, welcome to the University Symphony Orchestra. You've more than earned your place here. The orchestra erupted in applause again. The viola player hugged Maya. Other musicians came over to congratulate her, asking questions about how she does what she does, genuinely curious now instead of doubtful. As Maya packed up her violin that afternoon, she thought about her grandmother, about all the people who'd told her this was impossible, about every moment of doubt and struggle and practice that had led her here. She'd spent years proving she could play music without hearing it. But today she'd prove something even more important. That disability doesn't mean inability, that there are many ways to experience the world, that innovation and determination can build bridges across any gap, and that sometimes the biggest barriers aren't the ones inside us. They're the ones in other people's minds waiting to be broken down, one beautiful note at a time.